Hello, I'm Father Anthony Cicada. Welcome to broadcast number 4 for the Philothea Press bestseller, Work of Human Hands, a theological critique of the Mass of Paul VI, by the Reverend Anthony Cicada. To order Work of Human Hands and to read excerpts, visit www.philotheapress.com. Chapter 4, Latin to the Vernacular, Lost in Translation. By the time the new Mass appeared in 1969, Latin had disappeared from the Mass just about everywhere in the world. From the moment this transformation began in 1964, conservatives and progressives argued over what Vatican II really meant when it dealt with the issues of Latin and the vernacular. But the passages in Vatican II's Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy referring to the preservation of Latin and the introduction of the vernacular are ambiguously worded and susceptible to contradictory interpretations. So on one hand, according to the Constitution, yes, Latin is to be preserved. But on the other hand, also according to the Constitution, Latin is not to be preserved. If giving the mother tongue a suitable place in some parts of the Mass may be of great advantage to the people. Moreover, especially where an even more radical adaptation of the liturgy is needed, a more extended use of the vernacular may appear desirable. The practical effect of this gobbledygook would hinge on who would interpret or define the terms advantage to the people, suitable place, and extended use. And after Vatican II, of course, this was Father Bonini, who wrote the Constitution, Concilium, which had the authority to interpret the Constitution, Paul VI, who had long advocated vernacular and who backed up Concilium's decisions, and the national bishops' conferences, who under the provisions of the Constitution had the right to petition for the vernacular. Chapter 4 of Work of Human Hands tells this story. It also offers a resume of the question of Latin versus the vernacular for the celebration of Mass. Absolute intelligibility was not a requirement for liturgical language in the time of our Lord or in the early Church. For 1600 years, the Church carefully preserved the special status of Latin as the language for the Mass of the Roman Rite. Apart from that, the Church encouraged Eastern rites to retain their proper languages. She occasionally even permitted the Mass of the Roman Rite to be celebrated in a modern language. But these were not real precedents for the post-Vatican II process of vernacularizing the Mass. The languages used in the various Eastern rites were not true vernaculars in every case. Moreover, the Holy See required that the translations of the Roman Rite Mass be slavishly faithful to the Latin original. Hardly the case with the post-Vatican II translations. Why retain Latin as a liturgical language? Catholic scholars gave 4 reasons: sacredness, unity, unchangeableness, and tradition. All of these reflect doctrinal truths about the Mass or the Catholic faith. Advocating the abandonment of Latin for the vernacular, on the other hand, is historically linked with the corruption of doctrinal truth. The vernacular was used as a means to spread heresy, to falsify doctrine through mistranslations, and to deny the objective value of the holy sacrifice of the Mass. In 2011, 40 years after the Mass of Paul VI was promulgated, a more accurate official English translation of the Latin original finally appeared. Conservative Catholics had long criticized the inaccuracy of the English translations approved in the early 1970s. To take one example, the word gratia, grace, appeared 11 times in the orations for ordinary time in the Latin original of the Missal of Paul VI. It didn't appear in the official English translations of these prayers even once. Grace disappeared without a trace. We conservatives then claimed that this was the mischief of progressives in the national bishops' conferences. In fact, it was the result of the official policy of the Holy See. 3 documents issued between 1964 and 1967 by Concilium, the Vatican office entrusted with implementing the liturgical reform, progressively allowed more freedom to adapt translations. The final blow to any pretense at accuracy in translations came with the Vatican instruction Comme le prévoit, January 25, 1969, which laid down the principles that produced the distortions, omissions, and outright errors in modern liturgical translations. Who ultimately was responsible for approving the document that caused this mess? Was it, as we conservatives in the 1970s used to claim, a wicked band of modernist conspirators who surrounded our beloved Holy Father? Or does the blame really rest with someone a bit higher up? To find out the answer, read Lost in Translation, Chapter 4 of Work of Human Hands, a theological critique of the Mass of Paul VI. Our next chapter, the Mass as Assembly. To order Work of Human Hands and to read excerpts, visit www.philotheapress.com.